On today's Newsmakers, is Hamas's attack tied to prophecy? A hit movie sparks baptisms, and a former politician's misgendering nightmare. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable figures. On today's Newsmakers, we'll start with an exploration of biblical prophecy. Author Jeff Kinley joins us to discuss Hamas's horrific terror attack and how Israel fits into biblical prophecy. Let's welcome Jeff to Newsmakers. Jeff Kinley, you were one of the first names I thought of over the weekend when this invasion from Hamas into Israel unfolded for a variety of reasons. But as a prophecy expert, what has been going through your mind since seeing the news on Saturday morning?
Well, I'd just say this. We were scheduled to fly into Tel Aviv and right this moment that you and I are speaking. And so that was the first thing on my mind is that, God's timing and just protecting us from getting there. But I think to me, Billy, it's really just confirmation that we're living in the last days. I mean, the Bible prophesies so much about Israel, conflict in Israel, wars and rumors of wars that are going to take place, earthquakes that are happening right now. All these things that are happening are the precursors, I believe, to the actual end times events that we see in Revelation chapter 6 or 18. So in my mind, it's just more confirmation that we're living in very volatile times, but times that are very prophetic as well.
Yeah, and we can't get into every event, but there's such a complex history. But there are a couple of bookend events in recent history, and you just sort of mentioned one of them is distant history. It's AD 70 and the siege of Jerusalem, and this is when Rome came in. Let's talk about that event in 70 AD because it was a really defining event for Jerusalem and for the Jewish people. Can you take us through what happened in the year 70?
Yeah, basically, Rome sent the General Titus into Jerusalem. He laid siege to Jerusalem for many months, eventually conquering Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. He burned the temple, as Jesus declared in Matthew 24. Not one stone was left upon another. You can go there today and see the remnants of that. But that basically caused the Jews to be expelled from that area. There were about 10,000 that were slaughtered immediately right there on the spot. And then in 135 AD, all the Jews were basically banned and banished from the land. So it was a very significant event, Billy, because what that did was that ended up dovetailing into 2,000 years of history of the Jews being scattered to some 70 nations all across the world. So the fact that the Jews would come back to their land after 20 centuries being scattered to 70 nations is really the miracle on the Mediterranean, as it's been called. And no other people group has ever done that in history. And yet it happened to the Jews just as God predicted.
And it happened not all that long ago. We go to this other bookend event. I mentioned there were two. We talked about 70, jumping ahead to 1948 when Israel comes back on the map. And this was a monumental event. Talk a little bit about the significance of this. You just spoke to it a little bit, but there were a lot of people waiting for this event. Some thought it would never happen, and yet 1948.
Yeah, well, God had predicted this several times. In fact, it's been said that every Old Testament prophet besides Jonah in some way predicts the regathering of the Jews back to the Holy Land. The reason why this is so significant is as we look to the end times prophecies that in the book of Revelation and Daniel, even in 2 Thessalonians and Paul and 1 John with the Antichrist, none of these prophecies can really take place unless Israel's in the land. So you sort of have a step one and a step two. Well, step one has to be Israel being a nation again. And then step two can happen, which is all the end times prophecies. So the precursor for these prophecies happening is the Jewish people being back in the land. And up to half of the Jews in the whole world now are back into Israel. Again, that's just a supernatural gathering together that simply cannot be denied.
And, a lot of these events, obviously, nobody knows the day or the hour. In your view, based on your study of prophecy, what we can know in terms of what do you think the next event on the prophetic timeline is, the next definitive event that you think would happen based on what you see in Scripture?
Well, as you trace through Bible prophecy and the prophecies that relate to the end times, there's one kind of hinge catalyst event that we're waiting on, and it's called the rapture of the church. And I believe that rapture event takes place at the beginning, right before the beginning of the tribulation period. There are no dates to that. There are no real timings that we can attribute to that. It's what we call the doctrine of imminency, meaning it could happen any time. But we don't believe the church, the bride of Christ, is going to be suffering through God's wrath during the tribulation period. So I see that as the very next prophetic event. And then the one right after that, at some point, whether it's weeks or months, will be the signing of that peace treaty with Antichrist that will officially begin the 7-year clock of the tribulation period.
Well, and right now, a lot of people, just as a final question, they are watching what is happening. And a lot of Christians are feeling unsettled and fearful. They're wondering, how does this fit in? What's going to happen next? Even on the practical sort of matters of what other countries get involved in this. What would be your message to people who might be panicking or very fearful right now in light of what they're watching happen in the Middle East?
I would say go to Revelation chapter 4. And in Revelation 4, John sees a throne. He sees that God is in charge of everything, even though the tribulation is about to start in his narrative, that God is on his throne, that all is well. Heaven never panics, never dials 911, never meets an emergency session, and that we can rest in that sovereignty. And as one woman very appropriately said, God's sovereignty is my serenity. Let that control that God has in heaven be your serenity during these times.
That is a powerful message. The book is God's Grand Finale. As always, Jeff Kinley, appreciate you breaking down all these issues for us.
Thank you so much, Billy. Good to be with you.
Prophecy is without a doubt a captivating subject matter, especially when you look at the news and the times that we live. You can get Jeff's latest book, God's Grand Finale, wherever books are sold. And coming up next, we'll take you behind the scenes of The Blind. Now, this is the real life story behind Phil Robertson, star of Duck Dynasty, and this is a movie that is very literally changing lives. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. Our next guest is entrepreneur and Christian leader Ethan Drum. Ethan joins us to share how the hit movie The Blind has addicts and homeless people not only turning to God, but also getting baptized. Let's welcome Ethan to the show. You've been seeing the impact of The Blind and how this film is actually changing people's lives. You brought the movie to a couple of very interesting populations of people. Let's talk about what you saw and experienced there.
I immediately knew that the movie's biggest impact wouldn't be on the average American churchgoer. it would be on the people that most theaters don't even want in there, and they're kicking away from their curbs. People are holding up signs saying, please give me $1 for food, or please help me, or they're in a rehabilitation center. Because most people don't know that most homeless people struggle with addiction. So one of the places that I volunteer at is called Healing Transitions. And so it and Converting Hearts and places like Celebrate Recovery across the nation have had a big impact on my life because I had family members that were an addict. And, you know, as Americans, we're fine going to a soup kitchen and cooking meals or going to where homeless people are, but we typically don't want them to go to a movie theater with us where our friends see us. So when I began saying, hey, let's go buy 700 tickets for the women and men of Healing Transitions and get a movie theater, people were like, I'm not really sure a movie theater would let them in there. So first of all, I'm really glad Jesus didn't say that with the gospel. But second of all, I was like, well, why don't we just bring the movie theater to them? And so called a friend of mine who owned a production company and was like, these rehabilitation centers have a 60-inch TV and a speaker in the ceiling that might be from the 90s. Like, I want to build a legitimate movie theater. Well, ironically, one of the guys who was a part of the production company actually went to that rehabilitation center and was a patient and got out. So not only did we get to build a ball-in movie theater system, but a screen the size that they would have seen at their local theater, have high-quality audio. Well, when we got in there, we knew we'd have to do 2 showings, showing one at the women's rehabilitation center and the men's. And just to be honest, you never really know what's going to happen on a given day. People, while we were there, someone OD'd in the detox area. It's rough. However, both places were packed out, and everyone sits there. And to get someone who struggled with addiction to sit for 2 hours, it's really difficult because they want a Coca-Cola and they want a cigarette to just calm down from the nerves. But the peace that was in the room when they watched the movie became real. The other cool thing is that I'm in the South, and so most of the evangelical South know Phil Robertson and Duck Dynasty. So really was not hard to get them to sit there because he was very relatable to that cultural context, regardless of what race or creed they came from. Everyone pretty much knew who Duck Dynasty was. So what blew me away is not that they would sit and watch the movie, but that there would be an immediate response to the gospel.
And so just to clarify this, when you showed the film, what then happened in terms of the conversations and the actions of these men and women?
It became obvious in both settings that, one, the Holy Spirit was there, and that towards the credits that someone had to get up, present the gospel, and offer these people to be baptized, because it wasn't like a movie theater setting. They weren't just leaving being like, great movie, let's get in the car and go home. It was, they all had this look and this aura of, I got a decision to make and I want to make it right now. So in both settings, it was just the door was open to immediately get up, proclaim the gospel, and offer them a response. And what shocked me was there's already a culture of shame there because they've had to admit themselves, no longer drive a car, no longer have a phone, cut off communication from the outside world to go through a rehabilitation process. But unlike most audiences, I didn't have to ask anyone to bow their head and close their eyes. I didn't have to do anything. I just said, if you recognize what Phil is, presenting the gospel, stand to your feet right now and come to me. What I didn't expect is the quantity of people that wanted to immediately follow through with following Christ, and then on top of that, wanted to immediately be baptized. That's what we're for.
How many people would you say came up to accept Christ?
Well, the crazy thing is, on those 2 days, combined over 70 people, and then I've been getting text messages that it's still ongoing, so much so that we're planning to bring back a crew on Sunday to do more baptisms, more discipleship, because it's not, the movement hadn't stopped. It's going through the night.
So you had more than 70 people come up and accept the Lord. How many of those people, just for a specific number, were baptized?
And so we're baptizing as many as possible, and then the ones that couldn't get baptized, that had to go to there's classes they have to take that are very regimented by the state. We're coming back, and we're expecting over 70 more to be baptized on Sunday.
Well, the beautiful part of this is that people know the story. As you were saying, they know the end of the story. They know where the Robertsons ended up, But now, because of the blind, people are getting a chance to see how the family got there. And it's absolutely incredible what you have done with the film. I appreciate you taking the time to bring us through these stories of life change.
Thank you, and appreciate all you're doing to cover this.
Wow, that is truly a powerful story of life change and transformation. You can catch The Blind right now and see what it's all about in theaters across America. When we come back, we'll explore the nightmarish journey of former Mexican congressman who has been accused of misgendering someone. We'll get into all that and more on the other side of the break here on Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place, all day, every day. The CBN News Channel. Download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we are sitting down with a former Mexican congressman. His name is Rodrigo Ivan Cortez, and he has been fined, forced to apologize, and punished by a court of law. His offense? Calling a trans-identifying politician a, quote, man who self-describes as a woman. Cortez, who's refusing to back down, joins us alongside his attorney, Tomas Hendricks. Let's welcome them both to the show. Rodrigo, I want to start with you. This is your story. You're a former Mexican congressman. You were recently convicted, and the charge was upheld, of gender-based political violence. I want to get into what exactly you've been accused of, but take us through the events that led to this.
It was gender in the Congress. A transsexual legislator present initiative of bill that want to punish people of faith and ministers of Christian religions as a hate speech, even if they quote the Bible. So I expressed my rejection to that bill because it was going to be an attempt against the religious freedom. I explained that this is a very important issue, and I explained also that the way this transsexual legislator present that bill, disguised or dressed up like a drag pope, it was not a very respectful way to ask for respect. And I explained that a transsexual legislator is a man that conceive or ascribe himself as a woman. And all the hell broke. And after that message that was transmitted by Twitter and Facebook was the element of this suing and demandings. And it was something shocking because the freedom of expression, the debate, democratic debate, was crushed by this suing and this demand.
Tomas, I want to come to you on this because the fact that this even became a case, right? You can have a debate about whether or not you agree with what was said or tweeted. What was your reaction when you first heard about this case before you guys took it on?
Well, I'm sorry to say that I'm not really surprised. We're seeing a global trend pop up really everywhere of a violation of freedom of expression and restrictions that go well beyond what is allowed by international human rights law, even by constitutional norms in the different states, in terms of just restricting and acting as a de facto censorship on, political speech in this case, and even religious speech in some others, stifling public debate. So my reaction was that I was not entirely surprised, although there are certain specific features of this case that are still very surprising and I would say shocking.
Yeah, and I thank you for setting that up because I want to come back to you, Rodrigo, on this because you said that everything, the minute that you posted that message, everything went crazy. Let's talk about, I think people probably have a number of questions in light of sort of the context here. You post that, this transgender lawmaker becomes infuriated, I imagine. What were the steps that happened next? How did this go from something you tweeted into something you ended up in court battling?
This is, I think, multi-level madness, because this goes from this expression transmitted in social media to a court and then to the final electoral court without being related with any campaign or candidate. It was a democratic parliamentary debate. Finally, this arrives to a level that the Mexican court has created out of nothing a mandatory incriticability that cancels parliamentary debate, public debate, freedom of expression, and religious freedom. And this, what implies this? Dismantling democracy and imposing a single ideological thought without scientific or legal basis. We see a pattern here. A member of the regime goes to the National Electoral Institute, and this one takes this case to the electoral court. With this pattern, we have right now 2 cardinals, 3 bishops, 2 priests, and 2 members of Congress that has been sentenced. So the fundamental freedoms are greatly threatened in Mexico by the gender confusion ideology and an authoritarian regime.
Rodrigo, last question for you on this. I know one of the other things was publishing an apology. And the reports are that was a daily thing that needed to happen for 30 days. You can clarify that here, but do you plan to publish the apologies, pay the fine? Are you going to comply with all these things? Are you not going to as this process forges on?
Yes, in order to go to the international sphere, I must put that text that they order me to put in social networks. I have to pay this. I'm very willing to take these gender normalization programs because I'm a teacher at the university. So I know something about teachings and programs, educational programs. So I'm going to take at least some of them in order to say all the public what is happening and what they are trying to impose to us. Because I spoke out against a proposed law that would impose a blanket prohibition on Christian teachings about sexuality and hate speech. And because I took a stand for fundamental freedoms and protection of children, I was charged and convicted as a violent offender. And this violence, it's a very tricky thing. It includes gender-based, digital, symbolic, psychological, and sexual political violence. So free speech, I consider, is not violence as they put it. The self-evident truth is that a man can never be a woman. And it's deeply unjust for those who stand bravely in defense for the truth to be honest like this. So I'm going to make this public point, as public as I possibly could do, and follow the international path in this issue.
Well, I appreciate you both coming on and talking about this. Free speech and religious freedom are two of the fundamental, most important rights, and your story is absolutely crazy on so many levels. I appreciate you sharing today.
Thank you.
Cortez's story is a cautionary tale of how far things can really go when we don't ensure that religious freedom, free speech, religious liberty, that they remain the bedrocks they are intended to be. We'll be continuing to explore that story as it develops, and we'll be back in just a moment with more Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you can get the full interviews that you saw on today's episode. We'll see you again next week.